Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm John Hawkins. You're listening to My Strategy. We're coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. We're very happy to be here with you today and really glad you could join us. My Strategy episodes are live on Saturdays at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. Today we're going to be talking about peer pressure in the workplace. We're going to talk about the power of peer pressure. It's more motivating than money in some cases. Learning to handle peer pressure in the office, discover the power of peer pressure, and also learn how to become a ground floor leader using it. Well, happy to be here today. Saturday is a great day of the week to reflect on your strategy. It's the day that I choose to reflect on my strategy, but keep in mind that now or any time is a great time to reflect on your strategy. Our show is growing and continues to grow. We're now available on iHeart, iTunes, Player FM, YouTube, SoundCloud, Spreaker, so you can go there to listen to any of our past podcasts. Additionally, we have a live stream on YouTube as well, so you can find us there. You can find me on most social platforms. Hawkins John is my Twitter handle, or you can go to johnmhawkins.com. And just like anything in life, we need to have a strategy and a plan to help us reach our goals, because the best laid plans don't always work. This week, I am looking for stories from you on peer pressure in the workplace. So do you have a good example, perhaps a tip or a trick, something that you could provide? Then send an email to talk@johnmhawkins.com. That's talk@johnmhawkins.com. And those who do send in a tip or just say hi will be entered into the weekly giveaway. Well, peer pressure in the workplace. In this episode, we're talking about trying to please. Peer pressure, can it be more motivating than money? Talk a little bit about the sense of belonging and attachment is more important than money. What about if only workers could get along? We're going to talk about how to handle peer pressure in the office. Talk a little bit about the power of peer pressure, using it for good rather than just bad. Also going to talk about a little bit some tips around how you can use peer pressure. Going to then talk a little bit about being a ground floor leader and how to influence your peers using peer pressure, something that you can use to help become a leader. If you want to be a positive influence or do you want to be a negative influence, peer pressure can help. So we're going to teach you how to use that. I'm then going to talk a little bit about the workplace and how to create a climate of accountability with peer pressure. What doesn't work? What does work? You know, in many organizations and companies, they have a rigid employment and performance system in place. The challenge is that can impact performance negatively rather than positively. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. All right, this not money motivates Americans to work harder. Can you guess what it is? It's actually peer pressure. I've got an article here by Chad Brooks. His article talks a little bit about what is motivating Americans to work harder. He says trying to please coworkers is a stronger motivating factor than a high salary for some employees. This is according to research. The study by researchers at the University of Iowa found that a sense of belonging and attachment to a group of colleagues is a better motivator for some than just money. He says peer pressure is a strong motivating force, and workers' willingness to please people who mean something to them is often a stronger motivating force than financial rewards. This is according to George Stewart, who's one of the study's authors and professor of management at the organization. Is peer pressure more powerful than money? I think that's what we need to think about as we go through the show. I mean, from my perspective, I've been in situations where money has not been a motivator for me. In other cases, it is a motivator. It is something that you do as a means to an end. It says here, to come to their conclusions, researchers examined how members of self-managed teams allocated pay raise levels for their peers using questionnaires. They would ask the workers about their level of attraction to the team and their compensation, and ask their supervisors about the productivity of both individual teams. Stewart said the study confirms prior research which found that pleasing other people is a powerful motivating factor. We all have a social need to be accepted, to identify with a group, and to be part of it, Stewart says. So much so that peer pressure from team members is more effective than money in prompting stronger performance from the workers. However, researchers note that this works only when team members get along. They found that when coworkers don't care for each other, appealing to team spirit is a motivating factor won't work because there is no team spirit to appeal to. It's then that money becomes the primary motivating factor to improve productivity, says Stephen Courtwright, an assistant professor at Texas A&M University who recently received his doctoral degree from Iowa and was a member of the research group. So that's interesting here, that only when team members get along, and they found that when coworkers don't care for each other, don't have team spirit, aren't working as one, that then money becomes the motivating factor. Very interesting. Teams perform better when there is social pressure from peers to perform well than peers who wave a carrot and stick, Courtwright said. However, the carrot and stick method works pretty well when team members just can't get along. The study, Peer-Based Control in Self-Managing Team, was co-authored by Murray Batrick of Texas A&M University and published in a recent Journal of Applied Psychology. I don't know, is that true? Is it true that people can be more motivated with peer pressure and wanting to belong to a group than if they were to just get money? And I think from my perspective, I've been in situations where money has been a motivator. It's where you need to get to a means to an end, and you need to, afford some comfort in your life or, accomplish some goal. There's other situations where I've been in a team and money has not been the motivating factor. It's really been about the team and accomplishing goals together, working together, having that sense that what you are working on individually will come together and be greater than what the individual contributions are. So I think from that perspective, as we start to think about how peer pressure impacts us in the workplace, we also need to start thinking about what is the organizational culture around us. Is it a culture where we do have good relationships with our peers? Or is it a culture where it is more about getting ahead and beating the others in our groups as opposed to working with them? So I think all of this plays a role. From my perspective, I don't know if one beats out the other. One meaning, is money more of a motivator or is actually the peer more of a motivator? I think it's going to be a combination of both. We all need money to survive in this world, but working with people we like and helping to a greater cause can provide great value as well. So I think it's really hard to say, but what we do want to understand here is that peer pressure is one of those things that it does come into play. And it can come into play in teams when you are part of a team and you are not doing as the team wants, then they can apply a little bit of pressure to help get you back on track. You're listening to My Strategy. I'm your host, John M. Hawkins. We're coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. When we come back, we're going to talk about how to handle peer pressure in the office. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back, everyone. I'm John M. Hawkins. You're listening to the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio, and the show is called My Strategy. Today we're talking about peer pressure in the workplace, talking about the power of peer pressure, how motivating it can be, learning how to handle peer pressure, discover the power of peer pressure, and becoming a ground floor leader. We would love to get your thoughts. Please send emails to talk@johnmhawkins.com. That's talk@johnmhawkins.com. Those emails will be entered into a weekly giveaway. Additionally, later in the show, we'll be taking phone calls from you at 866-451-1451. That's 866-451-1451. Right before the break, we were talking about trying to please a stronger motivator than money. Now we're going to talk a little bit about how to handle peer pressure in the office place. I know peer pressure is something that, from my perspective, was talked a lot about when I was in grade school, perhaps high school as well. It's talked about less in the workplace, but it actually is something that does impact performance. Got an article here by Mark Williams, How to Handle Peer Pressure in the Office. He says here every individual has experienced peer pressure at some point in their lives, often beginning in early childhood. While we like to think we have outgrown the playground, adults still regularly succumb to peer pressure. It's the responsibility of strong leaders to ensure that peer pressure within their organization is carefully managed to maintain a positive and productive work environment. How true is that? We think that peer pressure only happens when we are young and at school, but in reality, there's peer pressure all around us. Could be family pressure, pressure at work, pressure from friends, pressure from people we meet on the streets. There's all sorts of pressure. It says here the primary concern when it comes to peer pressure is the tendency for even the most ethical individuals to avoid saying no, participating in behaviors they would have not otherwise to avoid damaging their social situation. Have you been in a situation where you've thought, I really don't want to be doing this. I don't really want to be here, but the whole group was doing it. Everybody from work, all of your friends were doing it. Well, it happens. However, this same desire to avoid discomfort can encourage employees to maintain and model appropriate behaviors. So it sounds like there's the flip side to all of this. Mark says that if managers can build a strong sense of teamwork within their group with a focus on productivity, a positive organizational culture will quickly take over the office. Peer pressure can become a managerial asset when teams are assembled. Allowing team members to determine their own hierarchies will often prevent negative feelings, but peer pressure may quickly set in. So allowing team members to determine their own hierarchies will prevent negative feelings, but peer pressure will set in. It is important that managers step in if it appears that peer pressure from one or more individuals appear to be making others uncomfortable, or to prevent peer pressure from sending a project down a path likely to lead to a negative outcome. It's interesting. When we try and create our own groups to focus on projects, it says that's when the peer pressure sets in. Hadn't really thought about it in that respect before. I guess it makes sense. If you have a clique or a group of friends that you are with, you're probably more likely to go along with what they want you to do as opposed to those who you do not know at all. When managers set clear common goals for team members, peer pressure can naturally help to keep the project on track. When peer pressure takes on a negative form, there will always be a risk that bullying behaviors will begin. And that's something we covered in last week's episode, or our last episode. We covered bullying. It says here, managers should quickly intervene if it appears that individuals has become ostracized by the majority of the group to determine whether peer pressure is involved, particularly if the behavior started with the outcast individual disagreeing with a popular decision or opinion. Have you ever been in a group, a project, a committee, and all of a sudden everyone says this is the direction we go, and you decide that maybe that's not the best direction, that's not something that would be in the best interest for the business or for the outcome of the project, yet those in the group are pressuring you to do it. So how do they go about pressuring you? Do they ostracize you and not include you in the group? Are they trying to, do things behind your back? Or are they trying to pressure you into going along with the group? Effective leaders must ride a fine line between the desire to foster a culture of support and engagement within the organization and while avoiding coming across as encouraging staff to conform to peer pressure. I think this is an important dynamic. It is easy for us to want to belong, to want to feel like we're part of the group. As we learned in the prior segment, that having these friends can be more motivating than money, but also there's the negative side to it as well. When we stop looking at the goals and we stop focusing on that and we focus on what our peers want us to do. Many times that's why we need to look at data, key performance indicators, making sure that we have metrics and a proper goal and vision and things that we're trying to achieve. All of that can help. If you're focused on the goal and the outcome, it is not as easy to become derailed by peer pressure. It says the effective leader must be able to recognize when an individual is at risk for yielding to the forces of peer pressure and to successfully intervene, which often involves both addressing those engaging in the pressuring tactics and providing coping mechanisms for the employee at risk. I can't help but think all of this sounds a lot like what happened in grade school and high school. You have a situation where you're playing a game at school and one person doesn't want to play the certain game, so they say, that's fine, we're not going to include you, and they run off and play a game without them. Well, it's no different in the workforce. Many times people are ostracized, not included in teams. They're not led to feel like they are part of the group, even though they have every right to be part of the group. And that's happening because of peer pressure. And I think many times, while peer pressure is something that happens naturally, it is, I assume, some sort of coping mechanism or way for us to, come together and accomplish goals. It can be detrimental as well. It said these interventions are particularly important in the event of peer pressure leading employees to engage in acts that negatively impact the organization. The power of peer pressure can be seen at its best when we use the organizational culture has successfully taken root in the heart of employees, encouraging staff members to support each other, work productively, and strive towards common goals. You are listening to My Strategy. I'm your host, John M. Hawkins. We're coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. When we come back, we're going to talk about the power of peer pressure. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back, everyone. I'm John M. Hawkins. We're coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio, and you're listening to My Strategy. Welcome back, everyone. Glad to be here. Glad you could join us. Our episodes are live on Saturdays at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. Today we're talking about peer pressure in the workplace, and we'd love to get your thoughts. Send us an email at talk@johnmhawkins.com. That's talk@johnmhawkins.com. Those who send in an email will be entered into the weekly giveaway. Later in the show, we'll also be taking phone calls at 866-451-1451. Right before the break, we were talking about how to handle peer pressure in the office, start learning to say no, and participating in behavior that otherwise we would likely have said no to. I decided to say yes anyway. In this segment, I want to talk a little bit about the power of peer pressure. The power of peer pressure. Got an article here by Ollie Gardina. He says, talks about using peer pressure in leadership development. He says peer pressure gets bad press for obvious reasons. However, peer pressure can also be a force for good, particularly in terms of leadership development. He says, let's explain why. He said it's often very easy to go on a training program, and get all fired up about how to do things differently, how to lead a team differently, how to schedule your workload differently, or whatever else it is important that you want to change. But when you get back to work and it all falls apart within a few days, why? He says, because many of us have 50 emails to answer. Everyone wants to talk to you because you've been off the radar for a couple of days. You're so immersed in the day-to-day work. To top this off with the fact that everyone else expects you to be doing your job the same way you always have. He says, however, if you set goals and share those goals publicly, you can have a much stronger chance of actually achieving them. Is this true? If we set goals and share them, can that make us or help us accomplish them? He says research by Dr. Gail Matthews, a psychology professor at U.S. University, supports this view. Her study shows that sharing goals with other people significantly increases the likelihood that they will become a reality. The research, which encompassed 267 participants, found that 76% of those who sent weekly progress updates to a friend reported successful goal achievement. Well, this is interesting. Now, when we are announcing our goals to a friend or somebody we know, and then sending them updates on the goal, there is a greater chance that we are going to be successful in accomplishing those goals. How many of you out there create your goals, set your goals, write them down, and never share them with anyone? Might be some food for thought here. It says this compares to 62% of participants who wrote their goals and actions, committed them down, and shared with a friend. One of the groups of the participants neither shared their goals nor wrote them down, and only 43% had accomplished their goals or were well on their way at the end of the study. The very act of formulating goals is good. It clarifies what you want and need to do. Working out how to achieve them and setting targets is the next important step in the process. Then sharing that with others, be it a colleague, friend, peers from your training program, increases your chance of further success. So what is he saying here? Sounds like he's saying that we do better when we share our goals with friends. But why do we do better? Going public with goals and aspirations sets expectations, both internally and externally. It's a training cohort all to do this. Publicly state goals and regularly update on the progress. It's very powerful. This is where the peer pressure bit sets in. Positive peer pressure incentivizes people to set the bar and then to keep it rolling. And we've talked about this on the show before when it comes time to accomplishing your goals. In a prior show, there was a lady who was trying to accomplish her goals, and so she wrote an entire blog and started updating the blog. So not only was she sharing her goals with a friend or two, but she was sharing her goals with the world. But once you start sharing your goals with the world and keeping them updated, that forms a sort of pressure on the system for you to accomplish those goals. Those who are tuning in and see you weekly aren't going to want to see you fail, or what happens if you don't accomplish a goal that you said you were going to go out and accomplish. Now, there's a public record that you have not done it. Going public with goals and aspirations set expectations. There's nothing like encouraging messages from peers congratulating you on your progress, to make you strive for further achievement, or seeing how others are progressing with their goals and realizing that you have let yours slip. That's a good motivator, too. Sometimes a little nudge from a goal-setting buddy is required to keep things on track. That's when a cohort can help pull together in a really powerful way. I think this is interesting, and I think this really says a lot about those of us who are eager to set goals, yet we're not eager to accomplish them. And perhaps this is one of those tricks that we can use for us to make sure that we have a better chance of accomplishing our goals. When you set your goals, work with a buddy, work with a peer, work together on them. That's how you hold each other accountable. Have weekly check-ins. Hey, how are you doing, Bob? My buddy. What have you accomplished this week? Well, I've accomplished these 3 things. Bob can turn around and ask you the same thing. That's how we can go about doing that. And I think this also applies at work and in the office. Many times there's meetings and, workshops, and people get together and have lots of good conversations. There's the tactical, the day-to-day that we work on, and we get those done. But what about some of those things that we need to accomplish that are at a higher level? The author then goes on to give us some top tips. He says, have learners write down their goals in a shared portal, discuss the goals in a group, including things that can help or hinder them in reaching their goals, encourage leaders to report on progress as well as setbacks in the portal, encourage the peers to support each other and help find solutions to problems along the way, and create a buddy system with scheduled checks on progress, and always consider the learner's need for support and guidance at the point of applying what they have learned. I think it all comes down to using peer pressure for good. It can really help us when we're trying to accomplish goals and objectives. And I think, too, nobody likes to set goals and then not accomplish them. And if having a buddy or a peer who can help you accomplish those goals, then it might just be worth trying it out. What do you have to lose? You're listening to My Strategy. I am your host, John M. Hawkins. You're listening to the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. Well, when we come back, we're going to talk about be the ground floor leader, how to influence your peers. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back, everyone. I'm John M. Hawkins. You're listening to My Strategy. We're coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. Well, if you're just joining us, welcome to the show. Happy to be here and really glad you could join us. My Strategy episodes are live and on Saturdays at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. In this show, we've been talking about peer pressure in the workplace and talking about the power of peer pressure. It can be more motivating than money. Learning to handle peer pressure in the office, discovering the power of peer pressure, become a ground floor leader. We'd love to get your thoughts. Happy to take your phone calls a little later in the show at 866-451-1451. It's 866-451-1451. Or send an email to talk@johnmhawkins.com. That's talk@johnmhawkins.com. And for those of you who send in an email, you'll be entered into our weekly giveaway where you can win a copy of my latest book called Coach to Greatness. We'll also give away a Visa gift card. Right before the break, we were talking about the power of peer pressure. This segment, I want to talk about be a ground floor leader. How to influence your peers. Got an article here by Dan Schwartz. The title of the article is How to Become a Ground Floor Leader. Dan says here, many people make the mistake of thinking they must wait for the corner office and fancy title to practice their leadership skills. But anyone can start becoming a leader long before the words VP or manager are put at their office door. I want to pause and reflect on this and what this really means. It means that do not wait to become the leader. You can become the leader if you have just graduated from your school and are at the first day on the job. You are a leader. You are a leader if you are 2 years into your job or your profession. You are a leader. If you do a career change, you are still a leader. What he's saying here is that do not wait to have the title before becoming a leader. And I think this is important because many times we sit around waiting for motivation, waiting for our leaders to teach us what to do, hoping that at some point we will learn from them and become leaders once we get the title. I don't want you to wait. I want you to start leading now. Dan suggests the same thing. He says, do you want to get a head start on your leadership skills as a core employee? If so, start becoming what he calls a ground floor leader and start influencing your peers. First, consider these questions. What has influenced you in your life? Was it a special event that shaped you and your personality? Was it a particular person who took the time to care about you and your overall well-being? Whatever your answers, we have all had the opportunity to be influenced in one way or another throughout our lives. What's more, we have a large amount of influence on those around us. We may not know whom we are influencing or when those moments occur, but it's happening all around us each and every day. So it begs the question, do you want to be a positive influence on others, or would you rather be a source of negativity and disappointment for those around you? He says he would choose, and guess to say that most of us would say, a positive influence. So how do we do it? The most effective way to understand how to influence others is to think about a person who has influenced you most in your life and answer these questions. What did they do for you? Why did they do it? What made it so special? How did it change you and your personality? So I think this is an important point because, when you're in a team, most likely you spend more time with your team members than you do with the leader of the group or the manager of the group. The leader or manager isn't there every day to lead the group. They can help set the direction. They can help hold you accountable. But there has to be somebody in the group, in the functional group, in the matrix group, whatever group, whatever project you're working on, who needs to take that leadership role and needs to ensure that things progress smoothly. So he gives us some tips on things we can do to be the ground floor leader. He says influence by teaching. Sharing knowledge is a powerful way to make a connection. Anytime you have the opportunity to teach a skill to someone else, you also have the opportunity to influence their life in a profound and unique manner. So what can you teach others? What about influence by caring? Caring is the easiest thing to do in the world, yet many of us fail to care for ourselves and others on a daily basis. Have you felt cared for at work? Is someone on your team perhaps needing a little caring, and that was something you could provide? That's leadership. Influencing by listening. Having a positive influence on someone involves saying the right thing at the right time to have the right effect. But this can only happen when we are truly listening to another individual. And there's actually a technique out there. One of my other podcasts, I talk about active listening. There's a technique to becoming an active listener. But good leaders are good at listening. And if you can listen to your team members, that's a leadership characteristic. What about influencing by giving? As human beings, we are selfish creatures. We spend most of our time thinking about our careers, our relationships, our own money, our own families, and our goals, and the need for our future. What if you approached your life with a new philosophy for influence? What if you approached life with the following mission? I am committing to giving more of my time and energy to others' people's needs and focusing less on myself. What a difference could we see in this world? He says, bottom line, if you want to be an influencer, give more of your time, energy, and focus to those around you than your own needs, and you will be well on your way to making a positive impact on others. Indeed, you can become a change agent in your organization and influencing others by teaching, caring, listening, and giving. I think these are great ideas of ways that we can be a leader day one in an organization right after we've come out of school. There's all sorts of things you need to learn to be technically competent, to be able to lead. But those core skills are things that will help you as you develop your technical competencies. You're listening to My Strategy. I'm your host, John M. Hawkins. We're coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. When we come back, we're going to talk about creating a climate of accountability using peer pressure. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back, everyone. This is My Strategy. I'm your host, John M. Hawkins, and we're coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. Right before the break, we were talking about being a ground floor leader and influencing your peers. We are still looking for your thoughts on peer pressure and how it has been used in your organization, either positively or negatively. So please send the email to talk@johnmhawkins.com. That's talk@johnmhawkins.com to give us your ideas. I want to talk a little bit about how to create a climate of accountability using peer pressure. We can use peer pressure for good. Got an article here by Teresa Wellborn. It's called Creating a Climate of Accountability. It's all about positive peer pressure. And we've been talking a lot in this show about peer pressure and how it can be used positively or negatively. So she's saying, how do we create a climate of accountability? And accountability is one of those things that we all need in our lives, whether it's our own personal goals, a corporate goal, or it's just our family goals. We need to find a way to hold us accountable. So it says here, this goes beyond the subject of alignment. Leaders can provide clearly established goals to executives, managers, and employees, but they also must assure that those objectives are accepted, and the employees are held accountable. What we know doesn't work. She says, for years, organizations have been trying to create climates of accountability through rigid employee performance systems. There is an interesting debate being waged on whether we should even keep doing performance appraisals because managers and employees claim it's not useful. And in fact, it may cause more harm than good. So does performance management systems do more harm than good? Think about it in your own place of employment. How do you feel when you have your reviews? How often do you have your reviews? Are they done iteratively and periodically throughout the course of a week, a month, quarter, year? Or do you have to do them just once a year? This is on the other end of the spectrum. Companies are using performance management systems to formally roll out their business goals to everyone in the organization, cascading messages and metrics from the most senior levels of the organizations all the way down to entry-level employees. She says much of the research that the energy team has done show that despite their complex efforts to roll out alignment strategies, employees remain confused about the direction and how the strategies affect them. This in many cases is because the business environment changes so quickly. As a result, the organization alters activities, which disorients employees. About 70% of the open-ended comments received from clients and in leadership work focus on direction, with employees and leaders saying that alignment and accountability efforts are not working. So she says, let's take some lessons here from social media and networking and how that really is in a form of peer pressure, and how can we use this in a positive way? She says, if one looks to the world of marketing and advertising campaigns designed to create positive peer pressure to buy gadgets and clothes are quite effective. People are accountable to their peers and will pay more money to purchase items to fit into their peer group, either at work or at school. Facebook and other social media are examples of positive peer pressure. Users are very accountable to their friends and do what it will take to keep up their profiles, add pictures, communications, and be part of the ongoing network. How true is that? You might be very good at keeping up with Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and all your other social media platforms, but how often are you updating an internal network or platform at your place of business? My guess is that many of us are better at keeping up with our personal social media accounts than those things that are at work. And why is that? Perhaps this has some truth to it. Number one, we truly care about our family and our friends, and we want them to know what's going on. There's that peer pressure aspect. Also, there's positive reinforcement that we get because they are our friends and they are our family. They care about us and they comment, and it feels good to post the picture of the dinner you made and have somebody like it and say, next time, invite me over for dinner. So how do we create that at work? I think that's what Teresa's trying to say here is let's start to look at performance and motivation from a different perspective. She says being accountable because you want to be accountable appears to work well. The challenge is how to create an environment where employees and managers want to participate in the system that holds them accountable for doing work. So many times it's like working on your personal social media versus your work. You're going to invest more in what you care about. Learning from the energy files. So she did this research study, and they've gone out and done all of these studies. So that's what these energy files are referring to. She says, energy research and client work proves that accountability increases through positive peer pressure, driven through high visibility. And she gave a summary about how the process works. She said the core of the energizing process is a pulse dialogue engine that asks employees to provide information at their work and respond to other inquiries about the business. The pulsing happens frequently, and these pulse dialogues match the rhythm of the business. Well, if you now have a way to send out pulse surveys and get feedback directly based on actions and events within the workplace, people are going to be more likely to comment on those as opposed to trying to remember everything they did at the end of the year. She says, energy metric is coupled with other custom questions that meet the needs of the business. So on the day the data is being collected, every organization uses an energy system has a unique customized metric that can be adjusted. She goes on to talk about how this different type of approach, which aligns very much to social media, can be extremely effective. So I think it's important for us to think about how can we use social media in our businesses to become more effective, to help lead others. And that really is the key. And I think, too, as we start to look at accountability from a different perspective, it's important for us to really assess, analyze, strategize, and plan, and implement this new plan so that we have the ability to get some results. So creating accountability in the workplace can be done through peer pressure, but it's not an easy strategy just to implement and be done. It's going to take some work. You're listening to My Strategy. I'm your host, John M. Hawkins. We're coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. When we come back, we're going to talk about how to put your strategy in place. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back, everyone. This is My Strategy. I'm your host, John M. Hawkins. We're coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. In case you missed this broadcast, you can listen on iHeartRadio and Apple iTunes, along with many of the other digital platforms. If you'd like to have something covered on the show, send an email to talk@johnmhawkins.com or give us a call at 1-844-MY-STRATEGY. That's 1-844-MY-STRATEGY. Well, this week we've been talking about peer pressure in the workplace. We've been talking about the power of peer pressure. It's more motivating than money. Learn how to handle peer pressure in the office. Discover the power of peer pressure in becoming a ground floor leader. We talked about peer pressure and how in many cases it is more powerful than money. And when we do feel a sense of belonging and are close to those in our project groups, we do value that peer pressure more and are more likely to accomplish our goals as a result of that, as opposed to being just offered purely monetary compensation. They said that sense of belonging and attachment was more important. But the caveat there was only if the workers got along. If workers don't get along, that's where money is more important. We talked then about how to handle peer pressure in the office and how sometimes it's hard to say no. And in many cases where we're in a situation where we feel the peer pressure, we say yes due to peer pressure rather than saying no because of the group we're with. But we can use peer pressure for good. It can help if we develop a strong sense of teamwork. There's also the risk of bullying that can come about as a result of peer pressure. What about the power of peer pressure? Peer pressure can be used for good. It can be used for good, and we can use it to help accomplish our goals when we start to share those goals publicly. Not only with the public, but in some cases we just create a peer group or a buddy, a goal buddy that we work with. And when you start to work with that specific individual and share your performance, share what you've accomplished, share your vision, your dreams, and provide updates, we have a much better chance of accomplishing those goals according to research, rather than those who just set goals and try to accomplish them on their own. That's one area where peer pressure can be used for good. And these types of things work well in your personal, family, or business settings. We then talked a little bit about how to become a ground floor leader and how to influence your peers. I think it's important, regardless of the stage of your career, whether you've just finished your academic coursework and started your first day on the job, you've been in the job 6 months, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, you do not need a title to be a leader. And you can start leading today. Think about what events have shaped your life. Think about who shaped your life. Do you want to be a positive influence or a negative influence? And this is something that you can start today. You can start it tomorrow. These skills are important for every leader. And you'll notice that the leaders that you do trust, admire, and want to be with most have these skills. What are they? Influence by teaching. Teach people what you know. Influence by caring. Influence by listening, and influence by giving. If you can master those skills day one, when you go out there at your place, at your new job, and just show that you can be a leader that way, you're going to learn the technical skills. You're going to learn how to become the leader, how to run the business. But it does take probably more time, or just as much time, to learn how to be a teacher, how to care, and how to influence. All comes down to, if we want to make changes, we need to break our habits. We need to be aware of the patterns and then go through and try diligently to prioritize and commit to the goals so that we can have positive change. Well, thank you very much for being with us this week. You've been listening to My Strategy. We come to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. We'll see you next time.